Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, August the 14th, 2025. On Friday, tomorrow, Trump and Putin are having a meeting in Alaska. To be specific, they're meeting at the joint base Elmendorf-Richardson, which is close to Anchorage. And this is the information I have at the moment. I'm making this video on Wednesday morning Pacific time, so maybe things will change, maybe the meeting won't take place. But at the moment it is going ahead on Friday, August the 15th. Don't know what time it is, but as far as I can see, the time so far has not been announced. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to look at what was going on astrologically at the time of this meeting. Yeah, I don't know the time of the meeting, but so I had to go for sort of midday, but I assume it will be a couple of hours, either side of that time. So I think we can tell something astrologically about this meeting. So yeah, in this video, at least at the end of this video, I want to look at the timing of the meeting, or rather the day of the meeting, to see what's going on astrologically. Also I want to look at the horoscopes of Putin and Trump to see what, if anything, they are experiencing at the moment. But before I look at all of that, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, Thursday, August the 14th. So here is the chart for today. And, don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. And so the moon is in Taurus at sort of noon New York time, August the 14th. So, we've had a sign change. The moon spent some time in Aries, and now it's moved into an earth sign, or is moving into an earth sign. And we have not had any planets in earth signs for a bit of time. We've had nothing in Taurus, nothing in Capricorn, nothing in Virgo, and it might have felt that things weren't especially grounded. But moon moving into Taurus does change things. It allows us to perhaps concentrate on the things that matter, and to be more realistic and down to earth. And what's more down to earth than the moon in Taurus? Though the moon in Taurus is a feature of the US, certainly this afternoon, and the Americas in general. But in Europe, it doesn't go into Taurus until sort of relatively late in the day. London time, the moon goes into Taurus at 22 minutes past 2 in the afternoon. That will be 22 minutes past 3 in the afternoon if you're in sort of Paris or Rome. And yeah, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, well, it won't be until very late in the evening or into tomorrow that the moon moves into Taurus. So it does, to an extent, depend on your time zone. So as far as the Americas are concerned, for most of the day, the moon is going to be in Taurus. I think you can treat today, Thursday, as being a Taurean day in a lunar sense. And the moon at the beginning of Taurus, it works really well. The moon is exalted in Taurus, but it's exalted at 3 degrees Taurus, or rather 3 degrees Taurus is the point of exaltation, or of maximum exaltation. At least that's a Vedic idea, I think, of the concept that exaltations can sort of ebb and flow, that you can have a mathematical ratio of how exalted a planet is. But I don't think that's so much a feature of Western astrology. So the moon in Taurus, it makes a square to Pluto, and it makes a square to Mercury. So what we have is a T-square. So Mercury and Pluto are pretty close to the opposition. We've got Mercury in Leo, Pluto in Aquarius, and then Moon is on the T. And so the Moon is a fixed sign. It can be quite stubborn, And square Mercury, square Pluto, some people are holding firm. They're digging in their heels. They don't want to compromise. And, they are quite clear about what their ideas are, what they believe in, what they don't believe in. And so you have to be perhaps a bit careful with that T-square. You have to also, make sure that you're not drifting off into a very fixed and determined fantasy. I mean, that can be Mercury opposition Pluto, getting really obsessed about your ideas, and you lose touch with reality. And maybe the moon in Taurus represents the key, because when you've got a T-square, that planet on the T represents potentially an answer. It's a way out. And so if you are in a position of high stress, especially if it's about different ideas and you're just not sure what to do, and you've got really deep thoughts, even perhaps deep feelings, the solution is the solution which is most realistic, which is most down to earth, and that is the moon in Taurus. And so the moon in Taurus, may be very fixed, maybe very opinionated, but it has a sense of reality. And because of that moon in Taurus, we can make the right decisions. But what we mustn't do is just totally believe that we are right, that everything is clear. We mustn't change our mind. You've got to work, as I've just said, with reality. As soon as you drift into fantasy, anything can happen. And at the same time, Mercury is making a sextile to Mars. And what's interesting about this Mercury sextile Mars is that we get a Mercury sextile Mars now, and then in a few days' time we get another Mercury sextile Mars. And the reason this is happening is because Mercury is going slower than Mars. Now, normally, of course, Mercury goes faster than Mars. But right now, Mercury is just recovering from being retrograde. It's gathering speed, but so slowly. And so, because Mercury is moving slower than Mars at the moment, Mars actually catches Mercury up. So that's why we've got the exact Mercury sextile Mars, now, and why we get it in a few days' time. And it does mean that the next week or so, Mercury is very close to that sextile. So it's an ongoing event, Mercury sextile Mars. And with Mercury sextile Mars, we have got the opportunity to get our thoughts out, tell people how we feel. And that Mercury sextile Mars is kind of linked up with Pluto as well. So you've got Mercury, you've got Mars trine Pluto, you've got Mars trine Mercury, and so Mars means that, or at least Mars gives us the opportunity to find a resolution. And if something is stuck, then maybe just by being very clear, by being open and upfront, Mars sextile Mercury, being free in our communications, not being afraid of showing some anger or some irritation, and even raising our voice. But we don't have to have a conflict. If we are clear and decisive, that's can be the end of a matter. And maybe that's a problem with Mars and Libra. And why people think that Mars doesn't always work well in Libra. Mars is a dynamic sign. Libra is a sign which is associated with compromise. So Mars in Libra might represent the inability to see something through, or just maybe we're afraid of causing offense. But that's not always the case. And with Mercury sextile Mars, we can be open and honest and direct, and if we handle it right, we can get our way. And also, if we've got a lot of thoughts, Mercury sextile Mars can be having loads and loads of thoughts, and these thoughts could just be going, all over the place. And we have to maybe sort of focus these thoughts and express these thoughts, because if we don't express our thoughts, then we might feel rather stuck and irritated. And at the same time, we've got a semi-square between Venus and Uranus. So here's Venus at 1656 Cancer, and it's semi-square Uranus, and Venus, planet of relationships, semi-square Uranus. So relationships can go in different directions. There may be surprises for us in terms of how other people behave, what they do, what they present us with. And we shouldn't assume that people are going to behave in a way that is at all predictable. They might do something that we really had not anticipated. And also Venus can be a planet relating to aesthetics and art and sort of unusual forms of art and unusual tastes. Maybe we'll notice that other people have unusual tastes. Maybe we have unusual tastes. Does that mean that we should be worried about having unusual tastes? No, but don't spend money because you think something looks really good and looks really interesting with Venus semi-square Uranus. You might want to get it because it looks interesting, and then a couple of days later, you look at it again and it doesn't look quite so interesting. It just looks weird. So those are a few thoughts about today. Oh, one other thing, don't forget, Jupiter is conjunct the fixed star Sirius. So we've had the Venus-Jupiter conjunction on Sirius. Just a reminder that Jupiter is there, conjunct this fixed star. Vivian Robson, in his book The Fixed Stars and Constellations in Astrology, he says about Jupiter conjunct Sirius, business success, journeys, help from relatives, ecclesiastical preferment. So from a business perspective, looks good. Whatever it is you're involved with Jupiter conjunct Sirius, it can be a real boost for you. Now you could say that Jupiter conjunct Sirius will be of particular value to signs ruled by Jupiter, in other words, Sagittarius and Pisces. But I think all of us can benefit from this aspect. So that's the picture for New York. If we turn to Sydney, Australia, then the moon at noon is at 23 degrees Aries. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, then the moon doesn't really go into Taurus today. It stays in Aries. So what does that mean? Well, on a positive note, the moon is close to a trine of the sun. Moon in Aries, trine sun in Leo. I talked a lot about moon trine sun in my video for yesterday, Wednesday, and if you're in the Americas, that moon trine sun is sort of yesterday's news. But if you're in Australia or New Zealand, it's very much there for you. Especially at the beginning of the day, and so things should work well, especially if you get an early start, and things should move, and there should be just a general feeling of harmony and things being in balance. Though as the day progresses, as the moon moves beyond the trine to the sun, okay, the moon is making a conjunction to Chiron, but that's quite a minor aspect. But it might feel that things are sort of calming down, and maybe you've done whatever has to be done. You've done the work, and maybe there's nothing more that you have to do. Is that moon conjunct Chiron a minor aspect? Maybe I'm underestimating it. Moon conjunct Chiron can be about wanting to do things differently, and additionally being able to have a positive impact if you take the view that Chiron is about healing. But we don't want to exaggerate, and we don't want to read too much into that conjunction between Moon and Chiron. But I think if you have the opportunity, you can have perhaps a healing impact on other people, and perhaps on yourself as well. Though, don't forget that Chiron can be the maverick, and so there may be times when you feel you have to do something differently if you are in Australia or New Zealand or in East Asia. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system. And here is the chart for noon today, heliocentrically, and Mercury is making a conjunction to Neptune. Mercury at 3 degrees Aries, conjunct Neptune at 0 degrees Aries, and Mercury conjunct Neptune in a positive way can be quite a spiritual combination. Can be quite a spiritual event which can allow us to transcend our sort of everyday boundaries, to move beyond things, and to get a wider perspective. But there is a negative view to Mercury conjunct Neptune, and it could just be about confusion, things not being clear. And this is a heliocentric chart, so it's not necessarily talking about us as individuals. Rather it's about what's happening around us and people's general perceptions. And just a lot of people may not be able to understand what's going on. They may not see it, and they may get confused. And that could be relevant if you're a government and you're trying to work out how best to respond to the international situation. Things are complicated. For example, with Trump's meeting in Alaska with Putin. So there's a lot of scope here for misunderstandings. And Neptune is also on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint. So Neptune on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint could be about a feeling of hopelessness. Again, I don't think that's us as individuals feeling hopeless, but maybe there's just a general vibe going on that things aren't so great. And I know that Venus and Jupiter are still in conjunction, and the Venus-Jupiter conjunction, the geocentric Venus-Jupiter conjunction, is it's a very fortunate influence. It's more important than Neptune on the Mercury-Saturn midpoint. That's a bit obscure, and so it's still operational, the Venus-Jupiter conjunction. So I don't want to exaggerate how bad things can be, and whatever's going on, Venus-Jupiter, the geocentric Venus-Jupiter conjunction does allow us to be positive. And also Venus is starting to make a conjunction to Uranus, and that might be important because we've got a double Venus-Uranus aspect. We've got geocentrically, we've got Venus semi-square Uranus, and then heliocentrically we've got Venus approaching the conjunction with Uranus. And that emphasizes what I said earlier about relationships perhaps having a life of their own, and people behaving in a way that you didn't necessarily expect. And Venus conjunct Uranus can be about aesthetics and what we regard as looking good. And different people have different ideas, and when it comes to matters of taste, there is no such thing as right and wrong. So that's the heliocentric view. One other aspect, Mars quincunx Neptune. Mars 0 degrees Scorpio, quincunx Neptune at 0 degrees Aries. And Mars quincunx Neptune could be about how one uses force and how we see force being used. And certain people, certain groups, governments may feel they have to use force, but they don't necessarily know what they're doing, because Mars is quincunx Neptune, and they may just get things, very, very confused. So yeah, that's the heliocentric view. And now let's look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, August the 14th, 2025. Aries. So you've had the moon moving through Aries for a couple of days. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon will be moving through Aries, all day long. And the moon moving through Aries, it's your sign, was, I think, quite a good time for you. Hopefully it was. The moon in Aries was making a trine to the sun in Leo. And so you got an idea about what you could do, about what was possible, and I'm hopeful that you were feeling sort of quite happy, and there was evidence that things were moving. And now there's a change. The moon is moving out of Aries into Taurus. So when this sign change happens, it's really dependent on where you are, what your time zone is. If you're in the Americas, moon moves into Taurus this morning, and you can really regard it as a moon in Taurus day. If you're in Australia, moon doesn't move into Taurus until tomorrow. That is the problem with doing these 12 sign forecasts for a global audience. I know that half my audience, I believe, is in the Americas, but I do have to think about the other half as well. And people do visit from Australia, so so my apologies if you're in Australia or New Zealand for my focus on the moon being in Taurus, when in fact it doesn't really move into Taurus until tomorrow. But if you are in Aries, wherever you are, the moon moving into Taurus, even if it's not until tomorrow, does represent a change. You perhaps have been thinking about what you can do, and you wanted to focus on action. And moon in Taurus is asking you to be more considered, to consider, for example, whether you have what it takes. You can have all sorts of ideas. You can have plans. You maybe even be able to initiate these plans, but are you going to be able to see them through? Are you going to be able to see them through to completion? And if you just trust in your own personality and your own dynamism, it may not happen. And so moon in Taurus is encouraging you, Aries, to be more down to earth and to consider what is needed. And it might mean that you have to also consider what it costs. Unfortunately, things do have a price. Now, if something really is important to you, it's an essential part of who you are, what your destiny is, then it'll be free in the end. You'll get it without having to pay any money or do yourself in financially. But other things which might be a matter of choice, you have to think, how are you going to pay for it? Or how are you going to get something cheap? How are you going to get something maybe for nothing? And so these might be the questions that moon in Taurus brings. And you therefore have a way to bring things down to earth. And there are things that you're very focused on, things that you regard as really important, maybe even just like matters of life and death. But again, you've got to ground it all. And Aries, with the moon in Taurus, I do believe that is something you can do. And Aries, it may be necessary for you to be very precise, to say something important using very clear language, and you have to be understood. You can be understood, because today, Aries, Mercury is making a sextile to Mars. I mean, this Mercury sextile Mars is ongoing. In a few days' time, we get another exact Mercury-Mars sextile. And the Mercury-Mars sextile does allow you to be very dynamic in a verbal sense, and you can use your words in quite a sort of clever way, and you can show an understanding of other people. You can sort of almost get inside their skin and really see how they're feeling, and once you can do that, you can give the impression of being more sort of sympathetic, and it's not that you're necessarily super emotional, super sensitive. You just get an idea about what people want to hear, and also how to get people to do things that you want them to do. And so, do utilize the energy of that Mercury sextile Mars, and at the same time, don't allow yourself to be messed around by other people. I mean, some people can be very confusing at the moment. They're not entirely sure what they want. They may give false signals, and if you don't think and you just take things at face value, you might be disappointed, or you might get yourself into a social situation or an interpersonal situation that could be regrettable. So be careful with other people, particularly if you don't know them very well, and they could say things they don't mean, and if you do take them at face value, you could at the very least waste a lot of time. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. Just understand that certain people can be somewhat flaky, and if you can get that, I think you'll be fine. And when it comes to the important matters, you can be very persuasive, and you can really ensure that your message hits home. Taurus. The moon is moving into your sign. Quite when the moon moves into your sign does depend on where you are. If you're in the Americas, then this morning the moon will be moving into your sign. If you're in Europe, it will be this afternoon. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it will be more about tomorrow. But it gets there in the end. And so, with moon moving into Taurus, things are looking good. You can sort of renew yourself and be aware that Mercury is now stationary direct. Mercury has been stationary direct for a few days, but still you weren't entirely sure about the way things were going, the way things were moving. You were still somewhat confused, but now things are changing with the moon moving into Taurus, and you have a clearer sense of who you are and what you want, and you can be down to earth, and you can also be lucky. You will be lucky, and one reason you might be lucky, and I should have really said this in my introduction. It's something I missed, is the fact that the moon is in mutual reception with Venus. The moon is in Taurus, a sign ruled by Venus. Venus is in Cancer, a sign ruled by the moon. So the moon is very strong at the moment, and so do take advantage of it. And so whatever it is you want to do, you can do it, and you don't want it to be too much of a struggle. I mean, you might perceive it as a struggle because the moon in Taurus makes a square to Pluto, and then it makes a square to Mercury, and so this Mercury Pluto opposition, which maybe you thought you were done with it some time ago, but it's now reactivated because what's happened is that Mercury has gone retrograde. Okay, it's now direct, but it went retrograde to the extent by which an old Mercury-Pluto opposition started to reform. And this aspect is really forcing you to think about certain things very intensely. And some things, you are taking things seriously, and you are very aware that you are being pressurized, that, whatever you're doing, whatever you're thinking, there's something out there telling you to take things further. It perhaps wants you to take action. And this thing, it may be other people, it may be someone pressurizing you to do something, and that especially would be the case if you're working, if you have a job, or if you've got people you have to answer to, like employers. But even if there's no one else around, you can create your own pressure. You are not prepared to just go with the flow, take it easy. Not at all. You know that you could do things better and you could take things further, and you could really beat yourself up about it, wondering how you could make things better for yourself, and that might be a bit of an obsession for you. My obsession at the moment, because I've got Taurus rising. I go on and on about my sun in Gemini, but I do have Taurus rising, and for some reason, over the last few days, I have been obsessed about what I did wrong 40 years ago and mistakes I made 40 years ago in the sort of mid-80s. I can't get it out of my head. I don't know why it's so strong at the moment. And maybe it's connected with Mercury opposition Pluto. It's because, I do have Taurus rising. And the moon, though, provides an answer, a solution, because the moon is making a square to Mercury, making a square to Pluto. We've got a T-square involving the moon, Mercury and Pluto, and so the moon is asking you to certainly be down to earth, and Taurians can be down to earth. Maybe me, with my Taurus rising, I do find it difficult to be down to earth, but most Taurians can understand what is important, and it might just be a solution. And it's perhaps saying, well, don't worry too much about the past. Well, in my case, I'm probably projecting there. Don't worry too much about what you can't do, things that you have no control over. Instead, worry about what you have right now and the resources you have. And if you actually look at the resources you have, then it's not so bad. And this Mercury opposition Pluto, it sounds a bit heavy, sounds a bit negative, but it can be transformed into a powerful energy and having a really strong willpower. And it may not be a fun aspect, Mercury opposition Pluto, but it's an aspect that can be useful, can propel you forward, and to take what you have and actually use it, and not worry about what was going on decades ago, not worrying about what you can't change. And the moon in Taurus, as I've just said at the beginning of this Taurian piece, is it's in mutual reception to Venus. It's really well placed. So Taurus, I do think that it can be a powerful day, and it's also a day when you can surprise yourself. Venus is making a semi-square to Uranus, and that can stir things up, and you can maybe do things that you weren't expecting to do. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. It depends on the situation. You've got to use your judgment, and you probably shouldn't jump to conclusions, and you should have some awareness of other people's sensitivities. People have expectations of you, and Venus semi-square Uranus, you might do something that no one expects, but might even seem out of character. Is that something you want to do? Sometimes one has to behave out of character, particularly if you feel that you're being taken for granted. Gemini. Mercury is opposition Pluto, and it's been opposition Pluto for some time. And so the question is, why am I talking about it now? Well, the reason I'm talking about it now is because the moon is making a square to Mercury, and the moon is making a square to Pluto. So you could say that this Mercury-Pluto opposition is coming to life. It's really starting to manifest itself. And you thought that this Mercury-Pluto aspect, happened a long time ago and it was over. I mean, let me just tell you when that when that Mercury-Pluto aspect was. There was a Mercury-Pluto aspect. The exact aspect was around the 29th of June. So you thought you were done with it. But now, sort of 6 weeks later, it's back. And I don't know if you can remember what you were thinking about at the end of June. But Mercury is your ruler. It's opposition Pluto, and it's been brought together by the moon. In fact, we have a T-square, Mercury and Pluto opposition, with the moon on the T. And so looking at Mercury-Pluto opposition, it's about you having quite powerful ideas about yourself and thinking about things, maybe more than usual. And there can be an obsessive streak to Mercury opposition Pluto. Once you start thinking about something, you just keep doing it. You keep going. You can't stop. And the question is, where do you stop? And hopefully you're able to sort of cover ground. And you can start to unravel things. And so, maybe there's just an old problem, perhaps something you were dealing with at the end of June that's come to life again, and you're having to think about it again and again. And, also we've got Mercury sextile Mars. So there's a lot of mental energy going on in the average Gemini's mind. Things are really happening, and it's difficult to stop. It might even be difficult to stop, when you're sleeping. If you're someone who dreams, I think most people dream. Your dream life could be almost reflecting what is going on in your everyday life as well. So that is a possibility. And so, what does this T-square mean? Moon square your Mercury, moon square Pluto. It might be that you have to, give yourself a break, work things out in your own way while the moon is in Taurus. There's nothing that has to be decided. And over the next few days, at the end, the last part of the working week, you can sort things out in your own way, yes, and not feeling that there's anything that you absolutely have to do or have to commit yourself or you have to commit yourself to. And Gemini, ask yourself, what does it mean to be decisive? There may be moments where Gemini you really feel you have to do something, especially as Mercury is sextile Mars. That is a very dynamic sextile. But if you miss today's Mercury sextile Mars, don't worry. In a few days' time, there is another Mercury sextile Mars. And the reason for that is that Mars is currently moving faster than Mercury. So you get the sextile as Mars overtakes the Mercury for the sextile. But then Mercury gathers speed and overtakes Mars. And so that's when we get the second Mercury sextile Mars. So just because you feel that you should be doing something, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do it. And dynamic action can take many forms. And if you can, be objective about things, you can see in theory what you could do, what you could put into, what you could institute, but do you actually have to go through with it? You might want to go through with it at a later stage. So Gemini, don't feel panicked and don't feel that you necessarily have to do anything at all. Maybe you just need time to sort of work things through. It's the end of the week, or it's starting to be the end of a week, and just sort of move into the weekend. And maybe you can be you can be more relaxed. Of course, some Geminis, don't have a choice. I mean, tomorrow, the Gemini president of the United States, or at least the sun in Gemini, has to meet Putin, and he's doing this with Mercury opposition Pluto. So yeah, if you put yourself in a position where you're meeting Putin, if you are meeting Putin over the next couple of days with Mercury opposition Pluto, it could be quite intense. But anyway, I'll be talking about Donald Trump later in this video. Cancer. We have the moon possibly in Aries, possibly in Taurus. Does it make a difference? Well, you could say yes, it does make a difference. Aries and Taurus are very different signs. Fire sign. One's a fire sign, one's an earth sign. They have different rulers. Aries ruled by Mars, Taurus ruled by Venus. So you might think about the differences between the two, but they do have similarities from a Cancerian perspective. And the similarity goes like this, is that if we set up your chart with Cancer on the first house, then, of course, we've got Gemini on the first house cusp here. So if we let's move it. So we got Cancer on the first house cusp. Both Aries and Taurus are high-profile signs. Both of them are about projecting yourself outwards. Being noticed. I mean, there are subtle differences. I mean, Aries is a sign which is more about career, status, getting noticed, your ambitions. Taurus isn't so intense. It's perhaps about friendships. It's about society, but still, it's important to project yourself outwards, and just the emphasis might shift, and it might be that Cancerians are ambitious at the moment, but as they think things through, as they work through their ambitions, they're perhaps realizing that there's something more to it. It's not just about status or financial success or recognition. It's also about doing something that you feel comfortable with, that you feel happy about, and perhaps getting support and appreciation from other people, from society, from friends, for example. And when the moon moves into Taurus, and the moon could move into Taurus this morning if you're in the Americas, it could move into Taurus tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But when the moon moves into Taurus, it does become very strong. And the moon, of course, has a connection with you because the moon rules Cancer. And it becomes strong, firstly, because it's in Taurus, the sign of its exaltation. It's in early Taurus. 3 degrees Taurus is the degree of Taurus's exaltation. So it's a great place for the moon to be. And additionally, the moon is in mutual reception with Venus. Venus is in Cancer, moon is in Taurus. They're in each other's signs, and of course Venus is in Cancer. It's your sign, and Venus is conjunct Jupiter. So when the moon moves into Taurus, it's a great time for you. It's a situation that you can really relish and take advantage of, and your ability to get on with people, to project yourself and your ideas and your ambitions, it's going to be really good. And you don't have to try. There's no effort here. It's just easy. Okay, there might be a bit of effort to begin with, because the moon does square Pluto and does square Pluto and Mercury. So what happens is the moon squares Pluto and it squares Mercury, and then it moves on and it starts to make a sextile to Venus and Jupiter. So the sextile between Venus and Jupiter is about tomorrow, Friday. The square between between Mercury and Pluto might represent a temporary uncertainty. You're not quite sure what to do and how to respond, and you're perhaps overthinking it. So, Cancerians can make things complicated, can worry. And that's probably what it is. As the moon moves into Taurus, you change and your approach changes. And your first impulse is to think, is this right? Are you going in the right direction? What if you were to do this? What would happen? And you might be concerned, and you might be thinking about it a lot. And the moon is so strong, though, that I don't think it's going to be negatively impacted by these squares between Mercury and Pluto. In fact, the moon is going to allow you to take what appears to be a difficult or a tense situation, and you can turn it round. So it might be about having to face a few complications represented by Mercury opposition Pluto, and then realizing that all you have to do is just be very down to earth about it. Look at what matters, look at what's real, and don't drift off on speculative thinking or allow sort of other people's ideas and speculations to get you down. Focus on what's right in front of you. And if you do that, Cancer, then most problems should just dissolve. And at the same time, what will be left is a sense of power, a sense of your power. And that is about the Mercury opposition Pluto. I think Mercury opposition Pluto can be a difficult aspect, but it can be about you being able to really understand things at a really deep level and not being worried about things, because now it can all be grounded and you can give it all a perspective, and that allows you, to really make the most of the moon in Taurus. And tomorrow, Friday, we've got moon sextile Venus, and even before the sextile, we've got moon and Venus in mutual reception. So, Cancer, that does mean that things really are working for you. And so, just don't be put off if there are temporary uncertainties, or if something seems complicated. If something does seem complicated, it's probably not complicated at all. You just have to be very down to earth about it. And finally, moon in mutual reception to Venus, with Venus in Cancer. That really does allow you to get on with people on a one-to-one level. So whatever's going on with relationships, it should work for you. And if you want to concentrate on one particular person, so if you're meeting lots of people, you can immediately sort of work out which people you regard as being important, which people you want to get closer to you, and they'll just be something that is increasingly natural and sympathetic about the way you present yourself. Leo. The moon is moving into Taurus, and I would regard the moon moving into Taurus as being something favourable, something that should work for you. Whenever it happens. Whether it happens, this morning if you're in the Americas, or tomorrow if you're in Australia or New Zealand. When the moon moves into Taurus, you do immediately have focus. You know what's important, and so if you've got ambitions and you perhaps feel that you haven't been able to get them together, maybe it had something to do with Mercury going retrograde. Things are changing, and the moon in Taurus does allow you to be very clear about what you want. And if there has been any sort of rivalry or misunderstandings, then the moon in Taurus allows you to resolve them. And you resolve them by being very clear and to the point, and you know what's important, and the moon is making it's not just in Taurus, but it's making a square to Mercury and it's making a square to Pluto. I would have said that probably the square to Pluto is more important. Sorry, the square to Mercury is more important than the square to Pluto. But perhaps we should regard the whole thing as a single complex: Moon, Mercury, Pluto, and with Mercury in Leo at the moment, Mercury going direct in Leo, and Mercury sextile Mars. This is a time, Leo, when you can give a very good account of yourself. You know what needs to be said, and you can speak with power and conviction, and there's no need to be concerned about the potential outcome. It's true that Mercury is making an opposition to Pluto. There may be certain things, certain people that you're wary of, but it could be in your head. It could be part of your imagination. And if you really think about it, you'll start to see that there's nothing really is in your way. And the moon in Taurus, when the moon does get into Taurus, when it makes that square to Mercury, that is a reminder. You just have to be very clear, and you must not allow yourself to be distracted. And so decide what is important, decide what you want to achieve, and then, Leo, you're going to achieve it. It's all going to come together. And at the same time, you're going to be on the right wavelength. You're going to be kind of linked with everything. You'll just know what to do, you'll know what to say, and you will understand other people's concerns, the concerns of society. So what you speak about, it's something everyone else is worried about, and so you come over as being relevant, and you do appreciate what's going on, or at least you give the impression of appreciating what's going on, and people are going to like that. So, Leo, I do think it's a time when you can be very powerful and you can accomplish a great deal. I'm not saying it's always going to be easy. There may be the occasional battle over the course of the day. I mean, the moon does square Pluto, but what are you battling? Are you battling real people, or are you battling your sort of imaginary fears? Maybe it's the latter. And so don't doubt yourself, and if you set yourself a clear set of goals, then I'm really confident that you can achieve them. Virgo. Mercury remains in sextile to Mars, and Mercury is going to be in sextile Mars for some time, because today we've got an exact Mercury sextile Mars, and in a few days' time we have another sextile between Mercury and Mars, and this is because of the retrograde motion of Mercury, or the recent retrograde motion. Mercury is currently going slower than Mars, but it will soon catch up, and that's why we get two Mercury-Mars sextiles. And this Mercury-Mars sextile, Virgo, does allow you to be very expressive. It allows you to be free and open, but on your terms. It's not necessarily about just talking about whatever's on your mind, whatever the situation. You just you've got lots and lots of things to say. You have to be perhaps more disciplined and decide where you want to put your mental power, because mentally there's a lot going on, and there's a lot you're thinking about. So what's it worth? So some things are just trivial and can just be ignored. Other things really do matter. So the question is, what does matter? I think that this Mercury sextile Mars would be a great opportunity to apply yourself to anything to do with money. So if there's something bothering you financially, it might be a great time to really work with it and really try to make good progress. And you don't need anyone's help. I don't think you can get things all by yourself. So there could be sort of a blast of mental and organizational activity where you really are able to look at numbers and maybe bank statements, or you might be thinking about what you need to do with money, what you need to do to make extra money. So that is a way in which this Mercury sextile Mars is working. So it needn't be anything that is public, but anything that other people need to know about, at least in the first instance. Now, Mercury is also making an opposition to Pluto, and this opposition to Pluto, it could be quite obsessive. Now, there's nothing wrong with obsession in itself. I've just talked about money, and if you're obsessed about certain financial details and you can be constructive about it, that is great. But if you're just obsessing for the sake of obsessing, well, that's not necessarily such a good thing. And so what do you do if with this Mercury opposition Pluto? Well, where do you find a resolution? Well, you find a resolution in the moon, because the moon is moving into Taurus. So the moon, when it moves into Taurus, it makes a square to Pluto, and then it makes a square to Mercury. And what the moon in Taurus is saying to you is you've got to get a perspective. You can't just get caught up in detail and pointless minutiae just for the sake of it. Sure, if you've got a good reason, that's fine. But if you haven't got a good reason and you find yourself obsessing, then the moon in Taurus can just say, well, look at the bigger picture, get some higher ground. What is it really all about? And moon in Taurus can have a certain spirituality to it, and it can be quite philosophical, and you can get a perspective. And once you get a perspective, you'll start to realize that something that you thought was crucially important, something that you thought required all your time, all your energy, isn't really important at all. I mean, you still need to pay attention to it, but you shouldn't regard it as a matter of life and death. So if you are obsessing about something, there is a way through, and getting that perspective really is very important. And also, Virgo, don't feel that there's anything that you have to do in a dramatic and dynamic sense. You might feel that way, but in actual fact, it all goes back to what I was talking about perspective. You're aware of your ability to take action, and you know what you can do, but then you ask yourself, well, what is the point? Maybe you should be thinking about things at a higher level. And if you can do that, you're going to be boosting your happiness, and also you're going to be more useful. And as I said right at the beginning of this piece on Taurus, it is a day when you can do useful work, particularly relating to money and financial organization, but just don't be obsessed about it. Just get it out of the way. You know what needs to be done. You know what needs to be what needs to be thought about. But make sure that there is a resolution, and that you're practical about it. And there is no room for obsession today, but there is a temptation to be obsessed. Because of that opposition between Mercury and Pluto, which the moon is highlighting through its two squares. But the moon has a double job. It highlights the Mercury opposition Pluto, but it also provides a solution, and that solution is about getting some height and getting some perspective, and most importantly, understanding what is important, and also understanding what is completely trivial. Libra. Venus is making a 45-degree aspect to Uranus, and it might seem, quite an obscure aspect, but if you've been watching my videos, you'll know that I regard semi-squares as being quite important. And with Venus making a semi-square to Uranus, you might be of the view that something has to be done, and that you want to demonstrate that you are a unique individual, that you've got something different to offer. And it's important that you're open about that. If you deny the fact, if you just want to follow the crowd, do what's expected of you, then that Venus semi-square Uranus might still manifest, but in a way that you hadn't planned for, you hadn't expected. Maybe you'll just do something and you won't know you're doing it, but you'll do it anyway. And that could be embarrassing. So it's best that you're aware of your need to be an individual, throughout the day. And if you see that something is not as you want it to be, and you want to change it, you can. And so be ready to intervene, be ready to tell people what you think. And don't be afraid of being controversial. Sometimes you have to be controversial in order to move things along. And at the same time, Libra, you might be quite serious, because you might be of the view that a lot of things are just hard work. They have to be battled. And that things won't just move of their own accord, that you have to actually do something to create change. And it may be that you're right. People just want to just keep going as they have done in the past. They want to just follow the status quo, and if no one says anything, just people can carry on forever. And so perhaps, Libra, it's down to you to interrupt the flow. And that's something that Librans are actually very good at. We often associate Librans with being people who they don't like to rock the boat. They really like everything to be calm. They want to get on with everyone. But Librans have a good understanding of the underlying balance, and because of that understanding, they know what it takes to upset that balance. So maybe, Libra, if you feel that people are being just too complacent, maybe you just need to do something. You need to upset things, and it just may be something you say, something you do, and it changes everything, and it means that you do get attention, and you should be getting attention. There is still a conjunction between Venus and Jupiter. Now, that Venus-Jupiter conjunction is over 2 degrees apart, but it's still operational. I mean, at the very least, one can allow a 3-degree orb for a conjunction, and some would argue a much higher orb, 8 degrees, or even the whole sign. So with that Venus-Jupiter conjunction, it's a time when you are lucky, when you can get noticed, and you will at the same time have powerful insights into what's going on. Especially once the moon moves into Taurus. And so this morning in the Americas, the moon moves into Taurus, and that does make things more complicated at one level, but the moon is in mutual reception to Venus. So you are very aware of what is happening under the surface. You get it. You get those subtle currents, and because you get those subtle currents, you can possibly utilize them. You can utilize them, for your own benefit. And Taurus, you're going to be someone who does get most things, and you'll notice most things. And anyone who tries to fool you or who tries to lie to you, today and tomorrow could be in for a shock, because you will know. And maybe circumstances will unfold which just reveal things to you. And okay, it's not a random process. It's because you're prepared perhaps to do the deep thinking, even the deep feeling, and to really sort of understand, what is happening and what is unfolding. And tomorrow the moon is making a sextile to Venus. Tomorrow, Friday, the moon is making a sextile to Venus. So that looks even better. If you happen to be, for example, president of Russia, and you're traveling to Alaska, if you happen to be, of course, Putin is a Libra, maybe he will benefit from the fact that the moon is sextile Venus, and Venus is in quite a strong position at the moment. At least if we look at his chart from a perspective of the sun signs, that's just a reminder that Librans can be really tough characters, and it can be a very political sign. Libra can be a very political sign, and at the moment you just understand things. You really do, and you can actually use that understanding to be able to sort of get maximum benefit from everything going on around you at the moment. Scorpio. Right now, Scorpio, you appear to be quite ambitious, or sort of relatively ambitious, maybe, at least compared to how you usually are. There are things you want to get off the ground. Perhaps you're of a view that recently a lot of time has been wasted, and now you want to get going, and that is absolutely reasonable. And from an astrological viewpoint, we've got Mercury making an opposition to Pluto, and this Mercury opposition Pluto, it did become exact at the end of June, and now in sort of mid-August it's still a factor. And the reason this Mercury opposition Pluto is still a factor is because Mercury went retrograde. And so Mercury went, all the way back to 4 degrees Taurus, and it got very close to the opposition of Pluto. And this opposition of Pluto, I think, has made you more ambitious and has made you sort of very determined to make something happen and also to have an impact. But it's also made you aware of perhaps some of the things that might have been preventing you from achieving your goals. There could have been things going on a sort of quite a deep level, a sort of psychological level, perhaps relating to the past. I mean, that's one view. It might have been things going on in your home or relating to your family that you thought required your attention. And so the question is, how do you move on? How do you move to the next stage? And you can't keep things to yourself. You can't be sort of too intense about it. And at the same time, this does depend on your situation, and it does depend on what you are trying to achieve. I talk about career and work because many people are interested in that. It might not be of a concern to you. Maybe you're retired, or maybe the work you do is so stable that you don't have to worry about sort of short-term fluctuations or even long-term ones. And so, I'm sorry if this doesn't fit everyone, but that Mercury opposition Pluto is an important aspect, and it does say something about how the past translates into the future. And it might say something about work. And so what is the resolution? Well, one resolution is to look at the moon. And the moon is changing sign. It's moving out of Aries into Taurus. And, when the moon moves into Taurus, it makes a square to Pluto and it makes a square to Mercury. And so that means we have a T-square. And one way of looking at a T-square is to see the planet on the T, which in this case is the moon, as being a resolution, as something that can help you move forward. And you could say with that moon in Taurus, when the moon moves into Taurus, that it allows you to perhaps understand the role that other people can play. And part of a problem might have appeared to be other people and other people's attitude, or perhaps other people's stubbornness, but other people can perhaps also provide a solution. So if you feel that you're stuck on something, that you really want to move to the next level, again, whatever that level might be, you don't necessarily have to do everything on your own. You can afford to be trusting. Of course, trust is a word that many Scorpios treat with a certain amount of hesitation. Can Scorpios trust anyone except perhaps themselves? But the right person, Scorpio, can allow you to move forward and to achieve some of your ambitions, and can also help you make sense of what you yourself are experiencing, because there is a lot of hesitation on your part, and you are concerned about quite deep things that might appear to be really holding you back. And continuing on the theme of other people, it's true, as I've just said, that certain people really can be trusted, but not everyone can be trusted. There are, I'm afraid, people out there who could be very distracting. They could have strange ideas. They may be very uncertain of themselves, and they might be dumping that uncertainty onto you as well. So if there's any flux today, that flux can very well come from other people. Some of these people you might know. Some of these people you might know really well. You might live under the same roof as them, or it just could be strangers. But not everyone can be trusted, and it is not because they're necessarily being deliberately deceptive. They may just not have a clue. But some people can be trusted, and perhaps that's one of the challenges of the day is to distinguish between the people that can help you and the people who are really up to no good, or just confused. And so that's something you have to think about. Additionally, Scorpio, right now we do have a barking dog, but aside from the barking dog, we've got a sextile between Mercury and Mars. And this Mercury-Mars, I think I talked about this Mercury-Mars sextile yesterday, but it's ongoing. And the thing is that Mercury is currently going slower than Mars, but Mercury's speeding up all the time. And so Mercury is overtaken by Mars, but then Mercury gains some speed and catches up on Mars, at least catches up on the sextile. And so you get two sextiles. You get a sextile between Mercury and Mars today, and then in a few days' time you get another sextile. And today there is this exact Mercury sextile Mars, and this Mercury sextile Mars strikes me as being really very useful, and it allows you to be very clear, but in quite an understated way. It's not about shouting from the rooftops or barking orders or making an exhibition of yourself. That's not what it's about. It's about you quietly but decisively telling everyone or what you want, or just indicating what you want. You don't necessarily have to use any words at all. And so if you're in any situation where you want things to happen, where you want results, this Mercury sextile Mars can allow you to do it. And it's a very subtle process, but being a Scorpio, you're quite used to these subtle processes. You assert yourself in strange ways, but in the end, Scorpio, with this Mercury sextile Mars, you get what you want. And just don't forget, this Mercury sextile Mars is ongoing. So over the next week, you will continue to be able to exert your power, and it could be quite considerable power, but no one may notice what's going on. They just go with it, and in the end, you definitely have the advantage. Sagittarius. Jupiter is conjunct Sirius at the moment, and Sirius is an important star. It's the dog star. It's at around 13, 14. Where is it? So 14 Cancer, something like that. And so Jupiter's quite close to the star. And this star, as I said in the introduction, can be about honor and preferment and you getting what you deserve. And so it just boosts to the strength of Jupiter. Jupiter's already, which is, of course, Jupiter's your ruler. Jupiter's already in a strong position by virtue of it being in Cancer, exalted in Cancer. It's also conjunct Venus, and it's conjunct Sirius. And I think today Jupiter is around 7 arc minutes from the conjunction of Sirius. So if there is honor and preferment available, then make sure that you go for it. Don't just assume that it's going to come your way, that you are going to be honored or preferred without you having to do anything. You have to do something. You have to make the effort. You have to make sure that people can see you, people can hear you. But that's something you can do, and you don't have to behave in a stupid way. It may be enough just to set a good example, to show what you can do. And at the moment, Sagittarius, you are pretty clever, and you're also, you're always clever, but you're particularly clever at the moment, and you're also very well organized, and you absolutely get what needs to be done. And it's not just about today, it's about moving into tomorrow. It's all clear. You know what needs to be done, and without drawing attention to yourself, or at least without attempting to draw attention to yourself, you can still get noticed, and that might help you get the recognition that right now you feel that you deserve. And there might be moments also during the day when you feel that everything has come together, the time is right, and you take the opportunity to be very assertive. You decide you're going to make your position clear, and because of that you get noticed, and you get the recognition that should be coming your way. But you don't have to get noticed, as I've already said. It's not necessarily important. If you do what is right, and you make sure that everything's in order, then there will just be a natural process, and the natural process, Sagittarius, will very much work in your favor. Now, the moon moving into Taurus, when the moon moves into Taurus, it could be today, it could be tomorrow if you're in Australasia, but the moon in Taurus, it's a good position for the moon. But from a Sagittarius view, it is quite low profile, and it does require a certain amount of reflection. And today and tomorrow, and particularly tomorrow, it would be a good idea if Sagittarians, do think about their well-being. Sometimes things can get exhausting, and the world can sort of grind you down. And with the moon in Taurus, the moon in an Earth sign, because there haven't been any planets in Earth signs for a bit of time, and so now that the moon is in an Earth sign, it's perhaps time to think about your body and looking after your body, and perhaps you've been going too far in particular directions, and you've allowed your mind or your sense of excitement to call all the shots. But now, do think about yourself and what's good for you and your well-being, and some simple changes could be very, very helpful. And at first it might not be something you want to do. The moon in Taurus does make a square to Pluto, it does make a square to Mercury, and it just could be that there is a moment of tension over the day when you realize that you haven't been doing things correctly, that you've been going too far in one direction, that you haven't been respecting your body, and so because of that tension, because of that feeling of discomfort, it's very short-lived, and I'm not talking about anything serious. You decide to respond, so regard it as an opportunity. And so if you know that something needs to be done, perhaps something needs to be given up, or you need to stop exhausting yourself, then just do listen to your body, because with the moon moving into Taurus, I think your body is speaking to you, and you and your physical self can develop a good relationship to one another. Capricorn. Right now, Capricorn, the moon is moving into an earth sign. The moon is moving out of Aries and into Taurus. And there haven't been any planets in earth signs. When I say earth signs, remember that's Taurus, Capricorn, Virgo. Okay, we've got the South Node in Virgo. And, that can be difficult if you're a Capricorn. Capricorn is an earthy sign, obviously. And so with moon moving into Taurus, things are coming down to earth. You have the opportunity to connect with the ground on which you stand. And at the same time, because you feel connected, that allows you to be more adventurous. So there's a bit of a contradiction there, or at least an apparent contradiction. When you are disconnected or you feel disconnected, you don't want to take risks because you don't know what's going on. If you're not sure of the ground on which you stand, what can you do? But with the moon moving into Taurus, you see what's happening. You understand what's happening, and because of that, you're able to move further afield, and you're able to perhaps take some gentle risks. And whatever you're doing, it's important that you're doing things for yourself. Now the moon in Taurus, it does make squares to Pluto and Mercury, so we've got this Mercury-Pluto opposition, which has been around on and off for a long time. It was exact, I think, at the end of June. But now the moon is bringing it into focus, and moon square Pluto, moon square Mercury, and so on its own, that Mercury opposition Pluto it's quite a tense aspect. It's an aspect that might encourage you to make things complicated and to ask difficult questions. Ask difficult questions of yourself. Do you really understand this? It might be this aspect might relate to agreements, documents, small prints. It could also just relate to money and the complexities of money, and it might threaten to get you down. But when the moon moves into Taurus, you find a way of resolving it. And what the moon in Taurus does allow you to do, it just allows you to see the facts and to see things as they are. And so it just could be a situation that has become increasingly complicated over the last few days, and other people have been making it complicated. And now the moon moves into Taurus, it's suddenly clear and it's obvious, and it's nothing like as complicated as anyone was claiming. And that might give you, a big sense of relief. And finally, with the moon in Taurus, you can start to enjoy yourself. You can start experiencing life. Now, on Thursday, you might still have this today. You might have this T-square to deal with, but by tomorrow, the moon will be making a sextile to Venus, and the moon is already in mutual reception to Venus, because the moon and Venus, moon is in Taurus, Venus is sign, Venus is in Cancer, which is the moon sign. And so you've got this sextile coming up, and this sextile, might say something about relationships. And I do think that with the moon moving into Taurus, your relationships with other people are likely to get better. I think that you're going to be more open, and you're going to not be so concerned about things. Perhaps because you're feeling more confident, and so don't be so worried. Someone might have been a problem in the past, but in the future, I think you understand what's happening, and so don't be afraid of people, and try to get close to them. At least you can see what's going on. You can put yourself in a position where you can understand what another person is like, and don't forget that there is a conjunction between Venus and Jupiter in Cancer still, and this Venus-Jupiter conjunction in Cancer does indicate that other people can be lucky for you, and that other people have definitely got something to offer. And with the moon moving towards this sextile between Venus and Jupiter, now might be the time when you can really experience other people's generosity. And it's generosity, it's not just about being given things, it's about the generosity of being given time and people being there for you. So Capricorn, don't feel that you are alone. And this does mean that relationships can sort of take center stage, and it's just important not to take them too seriously. The moon is moving into Taurus, so from a Capricorn perspective, moon in Taurus is quite light. It's not about anything too sort of heavy duty, and there is a view that moon in Taurus from a Capricorn perspective could be romantic if that's appropriate. It could be about just enjoying another person's company, having fun with another person. Yeah, you can have fun with another person. That really is possible, especially as the moon is in mutual reception to Jupiter. So Capricorn, today looks good, and today is, I feel, is going to be better than yesterday, and it seems that you've got over something, and you are becoming a lot more confident. Aquarius, you might be of a view that you probably shouldn't be doing too much. You have to think about yourself, and you have to think about your limits, and that's okay. And you have to ground yourself, and it has sometimes been difficult to ground yourself recently. One problem there's been is that there have just not been any planets in Earth signs, and now the moon is moving into Taurus. So with the moon moving into Taurus, which is of course an Earth sign, that means, Aquarius, that you can start thinking about what is important, and what you want to put your energy into, and making sure that you don't sort of float off. And that's perhaps been a problem, because there wasn't much stability. You weren't properly anchored, but that anchoring is now coming in now with the moon moving into Taurus. And the moon in Taurus may allow you to resolve a situation that appeared complicated, something that had been a feature of your life on and off, for the last maybe couple of months, and it had been becoming difficult, and you weren't quite sure which way to turn, and you could have been just holding on to something as well, and you were maybe confused by it all. And now with the moon moving into Taurus, there is a resolution, and the resolution is about being very grounded, deciding what is important, and not taking on too much. And so that may say something about today and tomorrow, Aquarius. There's nothing that you necessarily have to do, and it may well be the case that you are most powerful when you're on home ground. If you stray too far from the sacred earth, then you lose your strength, and that's not something you want, and it's not something that is necessary. And it may just be about the time of year we're in. You know, a lot of planets, from an Aquarian perspective, are on the lower part of the chart, and particularly now with the Moon in Taurus. Moon in Taurus in the most sort of private place in the horoscope, and so that is drawing you down, and it is anchoring you, and I think that is good. And if you're looking for solutions, then the solutions can be found where you are most comfortable, where you are most at home, and that might be your own home, or, as far as people are concerned, your family, the people you're close to. Again, they're the ones that can provide the solutions. You certainly don't have to go to the other side of the planet or even the other side of town to find your solutions, because they are right in front of you. Pisces. I mentioned at the beginning of this video that Jupiter is moving on to Sirius, and Jupiter is, of course, your ruler, and Sirius is an important fixed star, and it can be connected with honor and preferment and success and, you know, being recognized. So perhaps you can benefit from Jupiter being conjunct Sirius. So if there's something you want to do and you feel that recognition is important, you know, then perhaps you can find this recognition, and, you know, that raises a question of what do you need to do. Well, you may not have to do very much. You might just have to be yourself, and that is important. You know, Jupiter, your ruler, is in Cancer. It's exalted in Cancer. It's in a great position, and you could argue that, you know, this part of Cancer, you know, conjunct Regulus, is really significant, and so you know, what are you going to do? Just do something that you're good at, that you enjoy doing, and if you have a sense of fun today, then, you know, that is a sure sign that you're on the right tracks, and you don't have to take anything too seriously. There are temptations to take things seriously. You might think that, you know, you're not properly organized, that there are things you haven't sorted out, there are these details that need to be resolved, but, you know, I don't think that is the case. You know, I mean, sure, in an ideal world everything would be perfect, but is perfection a Piscean ideal? I don't think it really is. And, you know, instead you can be yourself, and you can be quite grounded about it. If you feel that you haven't got all the facts right, that there's something else you need to discover, then you can. I mean, the moon is moving out of Aries into Taurus. You know, moon moving into Taurus could be about finding something out, and finding something out that just helps you. It just makes things a lot clearer. And in fact, if there has been something bothering you, and it's been bothering you for some time, you didn't really understand it, and you're obsessing about it, it could be that by having a very focused search for the right information, you get this information, and then it's all obvious, and what you thought was a worry is just a nothing. And it's all about getting the right information, and it would likely to be very simple, grounded information that's telling you what you need, and that's it. And from then on, you can really start to enjoy yourself and be very productive, and you don't have to allow anything to hold you back. If something appears to be holding you back, I think that you can probably just push it away, and I don't mean that in a violent sense. You can just walk past it, and you don't have to be constrained. So Pisces, things are looking good for you at the moment, and Sirius is certainly helping, and you can be recognized without asking for recognition, because the value of you and the value of your work and your creativity will be obvious to discerning eyes. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And it's now time to look at the I Ching. And so I asked the question, what will Thursday be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 42, which is increase. It's a good hexagram. It suggests that things are going to get better, and we're going to get more. More of what? That is the question. Now, you could look at hexagram number 42 and see it as being just about things. Increase, what do we want an increase of? Some of us might want more money, or more pleasure, more whatever it is we want more of. But that is a sort of rather crude way of looking at this hexagram. Increase can be about just increasing our worth, not financial worth, our moral worth, our intellectual worth, our philosophical and spiritual worth, just becoming a better person. And with increase, what the question is, what do we need to do to increase? So there are two hexagrams in the I Ching. There's hexagram number 41 and number 40. I think it's hexagram 41 and hexagram 42. Hexagram 41 is decrease, and hexagram 42 is increase. And these two hexagrams are very entwined with one another, and they kind of have a similar message. And the question is, can you have increase without decrease, and can you have decrease without increase? So if you want to increase, you may have to decrease. And so what does decrease mean? It means, changing the levels. So if you want to move in one direction, you've got to cut out something in another direction. And it may be that there are things that you have grown out of, things that are no longer useful, things that you have been paying attention to that it's not worth it anymore. And this could link with the fact that astrologically we've got an opposition between Mercury and Pluto at the moment, and the moon is on the square of this Mercury-Pluto. And I've talked quite a lot about this Mercury-Pluto opposition because the moon is on the T-square. The moon is forming a T-square, and Mercury and Pluto can be about things that we are obsessed about. Ideas that we can't let go of, things that we regard as being super important. And the moon is telling us to just get yourself together, be more grounded, what really is important. And so maybe there are things that we have got obsessed about, we do regard as super important. We just need to let go of it all. Because if we don't let go of it, then where can the increase be? Because increase needs some space, so we need to create that space. So that's why increase and decrease are so connected with one another. Now, there is a moving line here. The fourth line moves, and this fourth line appears to be quite a lot about other people and the advice we're giving, and what seems to be going on with the people around us, and it may be going on with us as well. And strangely, I don't know how this sort of links to everyday life. It talks about helping someone move their capital. Now, do you know anyone who's about to move their capital city? Yeah, probably not. So, we have to, be symbolic about that. So it may be that someone is in the process of making a very big change. They're almost like changing the center of their operations. You could look at that in many different ways. If you work in one room, you have your computer set up one place, you move you move to another room. You could say, well, that's changing your capital. Or if you're a company, that would be changing your headquarters. And yes, if you're a country, you can change your capital. But someone is in the process of changing, making a big change, and perhaps we can help with our advice. That's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is to say, well, there's something we are changing. We have to change our own capital city. And so if you're changing a capital city, you see increase and decrease. There is decrease because somewhere it's no longer a capital city. It's just an ordinary city. It's just it's an ordinary place. And so one thing has to decrease, but another thing increases. And so that could be just about changing the center of our operations. And we can see that however we want. And because of that moving line, we move to a different hexagram, and we move to hexagram 25, which is innocence. And so the previous hexagram 42 does indicate that some changes are happening, that some movement is happening. Yeah, maybe we are changing our center of operation. But then the question is, are we going to benefit from this? We make the change, now what? And innocence is asking us not to have any expectations. We need to be innocent about the result. We don't know what the result's going to be. We should not have expectations, because if we do have expectations and we lose our innocence, then it's quite possible that nothing happens. So we have to be open-minded about it. And then, in the end, things will happen, but we shouldn't make assumptions about what happens. We should be innocent, and that's a right approach as we move into Thursday. So now I want to think about Trump and Putin and their meeting. So I'm just going on the news as I saw it just before I made the video. Again, this news might change by the time you watch this video. It may be that this meeting gets cancelled, so I've no idea. You could say, well, I'm an astrologer, I should know, but it does seem as if it's going ahead. And so let's look at what we know so far. And so the meeting is taking place in Alaska, and here is the chart of the meeting. I've set it for noon because we don't know the time yet. I think it's because for security reasons, it seems they're going to give the time at the very last moment. And this meeting is going to be taking place at the Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson. So apparently it's this huge base outside Anchorage in Alaska. And because I don't have a time of birth, I'm just going for a noon chart. I mean, it's likely to be within a few hours of noon, so I don't think it's going to be hugely different, although, of course, we don't know what the ascendant and the midheaven is going to be. I mean, I will be looking again at this chart, hopefully, when the time is revealed. So the first thing that I noticed is that at noon, the moon is making a sextile to Venus. And so, even if a meeting is not exactly at noon, whether it's late morning, early afternoon, whenever it is, there will be a sextile relationship between the moon and Venus. Maybe applying, maybe separating, I don't know. And the moon will also be making a sort of sextile to Jupiter, not an exact sextile, but it will be there. And the moon and Venus are in mutual reception. So, the moon is in Venus's sign, Venus is in the moon's sign. So you might say that all things being equal, that's good. If you want to have this kind of meeting, having Moon and Venus in sextile aspect, in mutual reception, would seem to be a good choice. And, additionally, as I sort of mentioned, I think in my video for, was it yesterday? I think we have no, it was the day before yesterday. So it was my video for Tuesday. I mentioned the fact that Saturn and Uranus are sextile. So Saturn and Uranus is at 1 degree 16 and Saturn is at 1 degree 1. So Saturn and Uranus are only 15 degrees arc minutes apart. And this may say something about the meeting as well. I mean, don't forget that in December 2021, Saturn and Uranus were square, just before the war started, just before Russia moved into Ukraine. And so that square is, it's quite a tense aspect. You can see war in that aspect. Saturn and Uranus. Uranus is about revolution. It's about everything getting upset, the existing order getting upset. And now with Saturn sextile Uranus, well, it's different, isn't it? As Uranus represents, the turmoil of what has happened in Ukraine and what has happened to the world order. And the attempt here is to bring it under control, sextile. And a sextile is, it's an aspect which is, it's 3 times 2. It has the tension of the opposition 2, and it has the ease of the trine 6 times 2. So it's not like a trine, a sextile. There is some work required. So that is what it's about. This Saturn sextile Uranus is about recreating the world order. Something has changed, but we can't be in total chaos all the time. We have to recognize that change and have agreements, institute new protocols, new ways of Russia and America, these nuclear powers interacting with each other. And it's not the last Saturn-Uranus sextile. There is a Saturn-Uranus sextile on January the 20th of next year, so 2026. So that may be what this Saturn sextile Uranus is about. And as I said on Tuesday, the Saturn-Uranus cycle is very much connected with Russia. And so I think it is important that we've got this Saturn sextile Uranus, at the time of this meeting. Plus, we've got Venus-Jupiter conjunction. And, okay, it's not exact, but it does help the meeting to progress. So as far as the astrology of this meeting, I think it looks quite good. But that doesn't guarantee that everything is going to work out. It's like, when you choose a timing for a wedding or the formation of a company, the astrology can be great, but that doesn't mean it works well. And it works the other way. I mean, it can be a terrible chart, but it doesn't mean to say that it's all going to come to pieces. And, it's a meeting where it came just after a full moon. So here is here's a full moon chart. Just before the meeting. So there was a meeting there was a full moon on August the 8th, 2025, which I've set for the Elmendorf-Richardson Air Base, and at the time of this full moon, Uranus was rising, and that might tell us something about this meeting. Not just Uranus was rising, but Jupiter was on the IC. Notice the house cusps. This is Alaska. It's getting quite far north. So one of the problems of the Placidus house system is it does start to break down as you get too far north, and that is an argument against using a Placidus house system. If you're using the whole sign house system, based on the ascendant, then you don't have this problem. If you're worried about the midheaven, then you can simultaneously use the meridian house system, which is based on the midheaven, if you want to do that. But we can see that Placidus is starting to break down. But having Uranus on the ascendant, Jupiter quite close to the IC, well, it's certainly dramatic. And Uranus is not just on the ascendant. There is, you've got Mars. You had Mars trine Uranus at the time of the full moon, and so that really indicates the drama of the meeting. Does this mean that it's going to have a bad outcome because Uranus is on the ascendant? I wouldn't have said so. It's just Uranus on the ascendant. Okay, you could say that there's going to be a disaster. A lot of, or some pro-Russian channels on YouTube have been suggesting that Putin is taking an enormous risk by going to Alaska, that there's going to be dark forces that might try to kill him or arrest him or whatever. I think that's being overly paranoid, but Uranus is on the ascendant, and so I think that does indicate that something is going on, and it's linked with this grand trine in air signs. So we've got Uranus, Pluto, Mars. They're all coming together. At the time of this, so it is dramatic. And although, is it going to appear dramatic at the time? I mean, I don't know. I'm not necessarily convinced. And of course, what we've got is we have got Trump and Putin meeting, and I've looked at what transits Trump and Putin have got, and I'm not saying that it's too dramatic. I mean, here is Trump's chart, and here are the transits that Trump has got at the time of the meeting. I mean, he's got he's got Venus fairly close to his Saturn, but I don't, and he's got the Sun is moving towards a conjunction of his Mars. That's certainly true. So I don't think that there is necessarily a huge amount going on for Trump, at least in a transit sense. And with transits, we shouldn't forget that transits are just one technique, and there are other techniques that we can use, that we should be aware of. Trump has just had a birthday, and if you're into profections, you could say, well, Trump has just turned 79, so that means that when he was 78, his profected ascendant was in Aquarius. So when he hit 79, his profected ascendant was Pisces. So the ruler of Pisces is Jupiter. So Trump's now in a situation where Jupiter is his year ruler. And so we need to look at Jupiter very carefully in Trump's chart. And I think that Jupiter may be relevant as far as this meeting is concerned. But I'll be coming on to that in a moment. And you've got Venus square his Jupiter. So any transits to Jupiter at the moment really do matter, because Jupiter is his annual ruler. And then there is Putin. Now with Putin, there are people who are absolutely sure that they know what time he was born. And absolutely sure. I think it's 9:30. Is it 9:30 in the morning or 9:30 in the evening? But there's no corroborating evidence for Putin's time of birth. And I don't care what people say. We do not know what time Putin was born. And, as astrologers, one can't just use a time and hope that the time works, because then the real time might be revealed, and we might just make fools of ourselves. So I prefer with Putin to stick to a noon chart, It just makes things easier. I don't know what his ascendant is. I don't even know what sign his moon is in. At noon, his moon was in Gemini. It's possible his moon is in late Taurus. And with Putin, he was born at the time of a Saturn-Uranus square, and this Saturn-Uranus square, as I said in my video 2 days ago, is really important. Putin is very much linked into Russia and the development of Russia, and Russia is so connected with the Saturn-Uranus cycle, and so it may well be that he's born with a Saturn square Uranus, and so he's going to this meeting with Trump, and it's an important meeting. There's no doubt about that, assuming the meeting takes place. And Saturn is now sextile Uranus, so that perhaps makes things easier for him. Perhaps it's an energy he's familiar with, but it's perhaps not as tense as it usually is. And of course, he has not just got Saturn square Uranus. He's also got Jupiter sextile Uranus. So that's part of his chart. But my view of Putin's chart is that it's difficult to make sense of, because we don't have a time of birth. I regard Putin's chart as being dominated by that Saturn-Uranus square, and I think there was an argument for saying that you could actually understand Putin simply with reference to his Saturn-Uranus square, and so that's it. So what is he experiencing at the time of a meeting? There's something. His Venus is going to be at 18 Cancer. So Venus is conjunct his Uranus, and Venus is also going to be square his Saturn. So that Venus square conjunct Uranus. Now you could say, oh well, that's Uranus. Uranus is an outer planet. How individual is it? Well, he's Putin. He's president of Russia. So that Uranus probably is, very important. So that Venus conjunct Uranus is saying, he's having a meeting. It's what we already know, and it's an important meeting, and it's a dramatic meeting. And additionally, the moon at the time of the meeting will be around 18 Taurus, and so the moon will be conjunct his Jupiter. So that's probably helpful for Putin, having the moon conjunct Jupiter. Now, if you want to take a completely sun sign view of Putin, and you say, well, Putin's a Libra, therefore his ruling planet is Venus, so we should look closely at what Venus is doing at the time of a meeting. And we notice that at the time of a meeting, Venus is in Cancer, in mutual reception to the moon, and Venus is actually sextile his Jupiter as well. So you might say that actually works quite well for Putin. But these transits that Putin is experiencing are relatively minor. I don't think that they strike me as being overly dramatic. And some have said that this meeting between Trump and Putin is just a listening exercise, and that it's quite possible that nothing will be decided. I mean, there is a strong view that that's what's going to happen, that you're not going to have any dramatic announcement. Russia is not going to have a ceasefire. I don't think Russia's going to... Why should Russia have a ceasefire? Russia has just had, or is in the process of having, a sort of major military success in Donbass. Why would it want to stop now? Stop now to have a ceasefire, because of course it completely works in Ukraine's favor, doesn't it? So that's Trump and Putin. What about the connections between the two men? I mean, how do they relate to one another? And so one way of looking at the relationship between Trump and Putin is just simply to do a composite. So composite chart, I mean, forget the angles. I mean, I know it shows an ascendant or a midheaven, but it doesn't matter because I don't have a time of birth. for Putin. So with the composite chart, one is taking the midpoint between each of their pair of planets. So you take Trump's sun, you take Putin's sun, and you take the midpoint between the two. So, Trump is a Gemini, Putin is a Libra, so the midpoint between the two. So it's not surprising that we have got the composite sun at 18 Leo. And so as far as some of the features of this chart is concerned, I mean, you've got a conjunction between the Sun and Pluto, so it's a real sort of power relationship. Who has the power? That's what it's all about. Trump certainly thinks he has the power. That he can get Putin to listen to him, and he's talked about all the threats he's made to Putin and how he knows Putin, and so that may be from Trump's perspective. I mean, with Putin, of course, he's going to be more understated about it, but it is a power relationship, and there's no doubt about that. And we've got Mars conjunct the South Node. I mean, not exactly conjunct the South Node, but it's sort of there. That Mars conjunct the South Node. Inappropriate displays of force. That may be a way of looking at Mars conjunct the South Node. So that's a composite chart. Are there any aspects to the composite chart at the time of the meeting? Well, I don't see anything hugely dramatic. Transiting Venus is at 18 Cancer, so transiting Venus is semi-sextile their composite sun. I mean, that is a pretty minor aspect, and with transiting Venus making a semi-sextile is not necessarily an especially easy aspect. It is the struggle to make some kind of connection. But then Venus is sextile the composite Venus, so their composite Venus is at 18 Virgo. Venus is at 18 Cancer. So as far as I can see, that sort of indicates some capacity for having a connection and a link. And then you throw the nodes in. And I think this is what is important. So there is the composite Venus between Trump and Putin at 18 Virgo. And so that says something about how the two men relate. So in a composite chart, composite Venus is going to be especially important. And so we've got the South Node conjunct that Venus, and we've got Venus sextile Venus, and of course North Node, opposition of Venus. Now, how do you interpret South Node conjunct the Venus? Well, you could say it's just a connection. That's all it is. Although if you want to play karmic ideas, that the South Node is somehow malefic, represents the past, maybe there's a sort of an easy connection which may not be right. Maybe it's too easy and it's not the right thing to be doing for either men. I mean, that is a possibility. But with Venus sextile Venus, they get on well, and maybe the fact that they get on well doesn't help either of them. It's just at some level maybe too easy for them to have this meeting. So that's one interpretation of it. And then there's how the two charts link together, how Trump relates to Putin, or is it Putin relates to Trump? So here we've got Donald Trump in the middle, his inner wheel. We've got Putin on the outer wheel, and with Putin and Trump, they both have Mars at 26 degrees of fire signs. So Putin's Mars is at 26 Sagittarius. Trump's Mars is at 26 Leo. So something about their energy and the threats and the way they use warfare and violence, there's a connection there. It seems that at some level Trump quite admires the way Putin is able to use force. I think that a few days ago Trump was saying that that for centuries Russia does war. War is just something that Russia does, and that's Trump's view. I think there's some argument to say that he's right, and so that might be Mars trine Mars. Now you can see though that Mars trine Mars could be a problem aspect if the meeting completely broke down and they really went to war with each other. Mars trine Mars, because just because it's trine doesn't mean it's a good aspect. And also Putin's true black moon Lilith is conjunct Trump's Mars, so there's a sort of a temptation there, and he sort of stirs something up in Trump. Now I regard the most important aspect between Trump and Putin as being the Saturn-Jupiter connection. So Trump has his Jupiter at 1727 Libra. Putin has his Saturn at 1728 Libra. So Putin's Saturn is exactly conjunct Trump's Jupiter in Libra. And I would have said that Putin's Saturn being exalted in Libra kind of has the upper hand. And Putin has the ability to close Trump down. Trump has all these big ideas. Jupiter in Libra, he's going to end the Russo-Ukrainian war in 24 hours. He says this, or maybe with one phone call. That's Jupiter in Libra. Jupiter in Libra, Trump can have fantasies about winning a Nobel Peace Prize. And then Putin comes along, Saturn in Libra. It's reality. It's something you have to deal with. You can't get round it. It's like with the United States. The United States has Saturn in Libra. And so the United States represents the Constitution, the blob, the machinery of government. Trump can try all he likes to do whatever he wants to do, drain the Trump, whatever, but the power of American government is always going to be a constraint on Trump. But here, I think that this Saturn is a problem. Now, I said that Jupiter is Trump's annual ruler, if you're into perfections. And so Jupiter this year, since his birthday, has been really quite important, is an important planet, says something about how he's going to handle the year. So the fact that Putin has his Saturn right on Trump's Jupiter suggests to me that probably Putin is going to sort of overall, not just in terms of this meeting, but in general, is probably going to sort of get the upper hand. And one shouldn't underestimate that. And Putin is someone not to be underestimated. If you can, do look for an interview on YouTube with what's her name, Christine Lagarde. Is she head of the European Central Bank? Where she compares Putin and Trump. She says a lot about. She's a very short interview. It's about 1 minute long or 2 minutes long, and she sort of says how well prepared Trump is. How well prepared Putin is. He prepares his brief. He knows everything. He knows the person he's talking to. He completely knows what he's doing. And then she compares that with Trump, and she gives the impression that Trump. Well, she doesn't really say anything, but Trump and Putin are really not quite on the same level when it comes to negotiating, and that might be how the Saturn. How Saturn conjunct Jupiter is working, and then there is sort of other parties, and one thinks of Ukraine, for example. People say, well, why isn't Ukraine represented? I don't know. I think that this is America's war. America basically engineered a coup in Ukraine in 2014, and so created the environment by which, in the situation whereby this war happened. And so you could say that, really Ukraine should not be involved in negotiations because it's America's war. America started in 2014, and so it's not, Ukraine is not, Ukraine is not part of it, because Ukraine is simply the instrument of American policy, or now sort of NATO policy. And so, why should Ukraine be represented? But still, Ukraine is going to be impacted. And so, here's Ukraine's horoscope, and here is the chart of a meeting. So, Ukraine was born on the 24th of August. But its independence was declared on the 24th of August. So was NATO. NATO was ratified on the 24th of August. And so they both have their suns in early, very, very early Leo. So Ukraine has its sun at 0 degrees Virgo. And, overall, this is a time when Ukraine is really feeling the heat from Uranus making the square to Uranus making the square to its sun. And of course we've got a new moon on the 23rd at 0 degrees Virgo. That new moon is going to be square Uranus, so that's something to look forward to, something that we should be thinking about. And so Venus is at 18 Cancer. So Venus is on Ukraine's south node, and so Venus is in the 7th house. Jupiter is in Ukraine's 7th house. So Venus on the 7th house is perhaps things happening that Ukraine doesn't really have control over. Venus on its south node. The line. If you look at Ukraine's horoscope, it has the North Node in the 1st house. What Ukraine should have been doing was trying to find an independent path for itself. And independent doesn't just mean being independent from Russia. It means being independent from the United States and from Europe. And so you could say when the United States engineered a coup in 2014, that was really a very south node experience, because it was surrendering power, it was surrendering control. There are people in Ukraine, government officials, and NGO officials, people who have an influence, who are not chosen really by Ukraine. They're chosen by, for example, the United States or Europe. These anti-corruption organizations. And this is not just a pro-Russian view. Yulia Tymoshenko, who really is a real opponent of Russia, who was involved in the 2004 Orange Revolution. She has said that Ukraine has become a colony, and so she seems to be understanding the problem that Ukraine has, and so. The South Node in the 7th house, and Venus hitting that South Node, and Jupiter about to hit the South Node, is just a reminder that Ukraine doesn't have any control, that Ukraine surrendered control in 2014. At least you could argue that. And so it doesn't look great. And I think that the Venus conjunct the South Node is, possibly the important thing. Plus the fact that Uranus is on Ukraine's sun, and it tells us everything about what's happening to Ukraine at the moment. It's not just this meeting, but it's the fact that the Ukrainian armies, certainly in Donbass, appear to be completely collapsing. The momentum of Russia's expansion is really moving fast, and so people are saying that the fronts are on the verge of collapse, if they haven't already collapsed. And so finally, we might want to look at Zelensky very briefly. What's Zelensky feeling at the time of this meeting? So here is Zelensky's horoscope, and there's So Zelensky has a conjunction between the Sun and Venus. So broadly speaking, at the moment, Pluto is on his Sun-Venus conjunction. And so he wants to be in control. He really does. He really wants to be taken seriously. That doesn't go away. That has been a feature of Zelensky. In fact, it's Pluto close to his Sun, Pluto close to the opposition of his Mars. We've had this, all the time, haven't we? Since the war started. Now, Mercury is at 5:27 at the time of the meeting, and so Mercury is exactly opposition his Sun Venus midpoint. Sorry, is that right? Yeah. Sorry. Pluto. No. By the way, Pluto's not on his Sun Venus midpoint. Pluto is, it's getting ready to go. When it goes direct, it will sort of move onto that Sun Venus midpoint. But that's not anything about this meeting. But what matters about this meeting is that Mercury at 5:27 Leo is right opposition his Sun and his Venus. He's trying to communicate. He's trying to get noticed, and it's hard work. And he has just had a full moon. There was a full moon at 17 Aquarius just a few days ago, just last weekend, and so he has got his moon at 1743 Leo. So he's just had a full moon right on his moon, opposition his moon, and so full moons, it's a moment of realization. And so perhaps we need to see this in terms of Zelensky, and Zelensky understanding the way things are really going. And it's not just this meeting that is a moment of realization for him. It's a fact that the fronts are collapsing in Donbass, and I think perhaps elsewhere as well. And so perhaps this is his moment where he just sees where it's all going, and he sees how it's all going to end. And finally, there is the horoscope of Russia, and I want to make one point about the Russian horoscope. So here is the horoscope of Russia. I've gone for a time. I think a Russian flag was put up, and so that's sort of 7:35 p.m. December the 25th, 1991, and so at the time of this meeting, Sun is at 23:14 Leo. So the Sun is right on Russia's ascendant, and so Sun on the ascendant, you could say that this is a new beginning for Russia, perhaps, and it would be quite fortunate having Sun on the ascendant. So, and there's one more chart, one final chart. Sorry, and that is the United States. And what is the United States experiencing with this chart? And the United States has got assuming it's born at 5:10 p.m. On July the 4th, 1776, has got its IC at 103 Aries, and Saturn at the time of meeting is at 101 Aries. So this is and Neptune is at 144 Aries. So this is a reminder that the United States has got Saturn-Neptune on its IC, and this Saturn-Neptune on its IC is going to represent many different things. It's about the integrity of the country. It's I'm not saying anything that the country is going to fall apart, but there's a lot of division in the country at the moment. Plus, its foreign policy is kind of sort of all over the place. And talking about foreign policy, the United States' ninth house is at 24:53 Leo, and so the Sun is moving into the United States' ninth house. The ninth house is a foreign policy house. Okay, you could say that the seventh house represents conflict and wars, whereas the ninth house perhaps represents sort of foreign relations. So there are things happening to the United States' chart. So that's all I'm going to say about the meeting. I think that if I were to say who's going to get the better of who, I think it's going to be difficult for Trump, and I do take the fact that Putin's Saturn is exactly on Trump's Jupiter seriously, especially as Jupiter is Trump's year ruler if you use annual perfections. So that's it. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.